Hi there. I'm Dr. Laurence Couldrick. I'm the CEO at West Country Rivers Trust, and I've been asked to give a short review of some of the pollution pressures that the North Devon catchments are facing. Ultimately, our rivers face effectively a death from 1,000 cuts. They have both chronic and acute pressures being put upon them. Some of the chronic long-term pressures we see in terms of pollution loading stem from things like agriculture, and that can be both derived from point sources, things like failing slurry pits, aging infrastructure, where we're finding nutrients and slurries, silage leaking out into our ditches and then making their way into the river, but also diffuse sources, things like spreading those same slurries and manures on the land, but where the land's compacted, it runs off and takes those nutrients and materials with it. That can not only bring those pollutants in terms of things like phosphates and nitrates, but it can also bring the sediment itself, which then smothers our river habitat, creating problems for spawning of things like salmon and other sort of migratory fish in our rivers. Alongside that, it also creates a headache for things like flood risk, and then in the summer months of poor base flow. So any pollution that's in the system has less water to dilute it. So these create some really chronic problems that we face year in, year out that degrade the health of our rivers. But alongside this, we have the acute sources of pollution that are more intermittent, and they can come in because of the fact that we have sewage treatment works and the discharging of those to our rivers. Those have kind of known descriptive discharges that they can be discharging, but also a lot of our towns and cities are connected to what would be called combined sewage overflows. Now that takes the rainwater and stormwater from our roofs and our roads, it goes into this sewage system, and rather than backing up our sewage and flooding our homes with sewage, not surprisingly, the water company discharges that into the river. But again, that can create problems for both the habitats and species that are living there, but also us as a society. So things like bathing water failures in some of our key tourist areas. So we can see that both the sort of point source pressures, these acute pressures, can happen in our catchment, and often that leads to things like fish kills and incidents that we might hear about on the news. But they can be on top of these chronic issues. And agriculture and sewerage account for some of the main sources of point and diffuse pollution in our rivers. But there are other sources as well, things like septic tanks and how we manage that, anaerobic digestion units. There are manufacturers out there sort of processing agricultural produce, so things like milks and creameries and those sorts of things. We also know, though, that alongside this sort of our very rural discharges, there are things coming in from things like our road network. So we often get materials, oils, chemicals coming from our road networks. And there can be historic issues we have from things like mining, as well as current mining, but less so than our history. And that can bring in things like copper and arsenic and some of those key metal contaminants as well. So it's perhaps not surprising that only 20% of our rivers in the southwest meet the ecological standards set out by the Water Framework Directive and our government. And it's vital that we all play our role in trying to address some of these complex and multifaceted problems. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the film.